Okay, folks, so we're continuing our introduction to the Casio calculator. Most of what I'm telling you has analogs for lots of other scientific calculators if you're not using it. I'm doing these videos for the Casio model that matches what we have as our current classroom set of calculators. If you have any questions about this, folks, I'm very happy to help you learn how to use your calculator. I'd just like to reiterate that you are responsible for learning how to use your calculator by the exam. I'm happy to help you before that, but I can't help you while you're taking the exam. Okay, so the most important issue with using trig functions in a calculator is keeping track of whether you're analyzing your trig expressions with the angle thought of as in degrees or in radians. And we already know how to evaluate the unit circle angles for either degrees or radians. But we want to learn how to use our calculator here. And probably what's most important is if you take a look up here, as I turn this calculator on, and this is just how it was preset, as I turn this calculator on, you can see this highlighted D right here. This tells me that my calculator is currently in degree mode. In fact, if I were to hit the Shift button and go into Setup, so if I hit Shift, Setup, this pulls up a lot of features for the calculator. You can also scroll down and find other features. This is where you might want to change to a mixed fraction default or an improper fraction default, etc. But this is what we first come to. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to go ahead and hit all clear. And if I go to Shift Setup, it pulls up this menu of options here that I can toggle simply by pushing the appropriate button down on the keypad. So you'll notice that here is 3. That's what's currently that's the most recent button pressed as far as mode for trigonometric functions. If I press 4, that took me out of that menu, and it may seem like nothing's happened, but if you look up here again, where we had the highlighted D for degree, it's now a highlighted R for radian. So whether it's this calculator or any other calculator you use, you want to learn how to shift between degree and radian mode, and most modern calculators have both options. There's another mode called a gradient mode. We won't be using that in this class. Okay, so let's go ahead and pause the video while you jot down some notes for how to shift between degree and radian mode. And this is very important, folks, because if you go to take an exam and you're using one of our classroom calculators, the last user might have been using it in a different mode than you, and you need to know how to switch it back and forth. So pause the video and write down some instructions for yourself for toggling between degree and radian mode. Okay, so let's go ahead and sample this. Let's go ahead and give it a shot here. Folks, I'm not going to be writing down my solutions as I go through with you, partly because you can do that, and partly because if I click on my field here, I lose the access to the calculator, and I want to keep it in the foreground. So the first question says, with your calculator, evaluate the sine of 30 degrees and the sine of 30 no units. Well, unitless we know means radian. So let's go ahead and first calculate the sine of 30 degrees, and we actually know the answer to that question. What's the answer to the sine of 30 degrees? Without a calculator, it's a unit circle angle, one of our special angles. We know that the answer is 1/2, or as a decimal, 0.5. Let's verify that. So I need to be in radian mode, or excuse me, degree mode, so I need to switch modes here. You may already be in the right mode. I'll hit Shift, Mode, and I want to press the number 3 to toggle me into degree mode. And I can see it's hard for my eyes, but I can see that letter D is highlighted there. So now I can go ahead and type the sine. Notice, like some of our other functions, as soon as I type the sine function, it puts the open parentheses there, but it will be on me to remember to close it. So now I'll type 30. There's no degree mark to enter, but that's okay because we're in degree mode. So now I'll go ahead and close those parentheses and hit enter, and sure enough, we got the value 1/2, or as we learned to do in an earlier video, we can convert that back and forth between a decimal and a fraction. So we already knew that was the answer, but we used a calculator to evaluate it. Now let's be careful here, because this next question asks me to evaluate the sine of 30. There's no units on that, so it's implied to be radians. So I'll hit Shift Mode, and I need to get into the radian mode, so I'll press 4, and now I am in radian mode, and now I can type the sine of 30 close parentheses. Okay. We hit enter, and we get the value of the sine of 30 radians. By the way, the fact that the sine value came out to be negative, and in fact negative close to -1, that tells me that this 30 radians lies somewhere in the third or fourth quadrant where the sine values are negative. I'm not familiar with where 30 radians is. We could compute where it is, but it's not one of the angles I'm more comfortable with. Okay, so let's go ahead and now work a number of these examples here. And I'd like to work a couple of them with you. So let's go ahead and do the cosine of 17 degrees. Please be working along with me. Please make sure you get the same values in your calculator. This is one of those pre-works where I won't know if you cheated, but you may not learn the skills you need to learn if you don't work this along with me. So let's go ahead and compute the cosine of 17 degrees. So I'm going to have to switch back to degree mode. I'm now in degree mode. Ooh, I've got a mess here. Let's clear that out. And let's go ahead and enter in the cosine of 17 degrees. Now, these modern calculators are actually powerful enough that if I hit enter, it will know to close that parentheses and execute the command. But don't rely on that. In longer expressions, that can cause you trouble. So I'm going to go ahead and remember to put my closed parentheses there and hit enter, and that's just computed the cosine of 17 degrees. 17 degrees is relatively close to 0, and the cosine of 0 degrees is 1, so that passes the smell test. But again, folks, this can get you into trouble all the time in this class if you're using a calculator. Make sure that you're in the correct mode. Maybe the first thing you should do anytime you pick up a calculator is test it with a couple of known special angles to just confirm you're in the mode you think you are. Okay, so that was that question. I'm going to have to scroll down here. So let's go ahead and do question. Let me see if I can get to where I can see all of these. So let's go ahead and enter in this expression. So now I've got a combination of algebraic operations as well as evaluating trigonometric expressions. So let's go ahead here. We want to take 1 minus the tangent of 3 and raise that result to the 5th power. So I'm going to have to put an open parentheses here, 1 minus, and then we can go ahead and type tangent, but we're going to get into trouble here because what are the units on 3? It's not 3 degrees, it's 3 radians. So let me first go in here and change to the radian mode, and now I'm back into radians, and I can type 3. Now again, this is where it's convenient that this remembers to open a parentheses for me, but we've got a couple of doors currently open that we need to remember to close. I need to close the door on the tangent operation, and then because I don't want to just raise the tangent expression to the 5th power, I want to raise the entire difference to the 5th power. I need to close that set of parentheses there. Now I've got the entire difference in parentheses, and we talked about this in the first video. I can now use my templated exponent button to then go ahead and enter to the 5th power. And there's our decimal approximation. Folks, I will modify these directions to say round your answer to the nearest 2 decimal places. Okay, let's keep going. The next thing I want to evaluate is the secant of 45 degrees. How are we going to evaluate the secant of 45 degrees? Well, we just look at our calculator here and we find the secant button. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. So we need to, even though this is a expression that we work with all the time, our calculator and most calculators do not have secant function buttons. They require you to know your reciprocal identities. So we know by the reciprocal identity that the secant of 45 degrees is 1 over the cosine of 45 degrees. By the way, we'll get the answer from our calculator. Maybe it'll give us an exact answer, maybe not. Sometimes these calculators nowadays have a few of the unit circle values, the special angles coded into them, so it might give me the exact answer. Maybe it will just give me a decimal. That depends. But we already know that the answer to this question, what's the cosine of 45 degrees? It's radical 2 over 2. Or if we do a little bit of rewriting, that this will come out to be the square root of 2. And sure enough, if we enter this into our calculator, if we were to go type, now I'm comfortable with using my grouping symbols. Maybe I'll do that later though. Let's go ahead and use our templated fraction, and we'll do 1, and then we need to scroll over to get us into the denominator, and I'm going to type the cosine of 45 degrees, and I type 45, but it's time to double check. We're supposed to be doing the cosine of 45 degrees. We're still in radians, and I did this on purpose, folks. I made us jump back and forth over and over again. So let's go ahead and make sure we change our mode back into degrees. Now I'm in degrees, so when I hit enter, notice that this powerful Casio actually has this unit circle value coded into it as the square root of 2. That's great. That's what we expected. Sometimes it might output a decimal instead, and you can maybe be able to toggle back and forth, but a lot of times if it is an irrational number, the calculator won't be able to take the decimal approximation and know what irrational number that came from. So that's not a guarantee that you'll be able to write this so nicely. Okay, let's keep going. So what I'd like to do next is to go ahead and evaluate this. This is called the arctangent function or the tan inverse function. And we'll be talking about it next time. We'll be talking about it in another pre-work, but I wanted you to get practice entering in a calculator since that's what we're working on right now. So let's see here. It says in radians, so let me first clear everything out. Let me get into radian mode again. Boy, we're getting a lot of practice with this. Now we're in radian mode, and I'm going to type the arctangent of 1. So even though I don't know exactly what arctangent means, that's okay. I'll type shift, and there's my tangent button, and the arctangent button or the inverse tangent button rests above it. Now I press shift because that was in the same color as the shift color. On this calculator it's yellow. That might be different on your Casio. And then I'm going to go ahead, we want the arctangent of 1, and we'll close this parentheses. And when we hit enter, we got 1 over 4 pi, or pi over 4. So that tells us that the arctangent of 1 is equal to pi over 4. We'll talk more about this soon. I can't wait to talk about this. It's one of my favorite topics. But this says that if we take the tangent of pi over 4, we get 1. It's called the inverse tangent statement, but there's a little bit of nuance there, which is why I can't talk about it just yet. Okay, we can do the same thing if we just change modes. So let's go back into degree mode. By the way, notice that when you're talking inverse trig functions, you don't know whether you're in degrees or radians by my units, so that can be a little bit tricky. So I had to specify we're in degrees here. So let's clear this out, what we have, and let's go ahead and do the arctangent of 1. And in this case, it's not going to give us pi over 4 radians. It's going to give us 45 degrees. Okay, folks, I'm going to leave you to practice the rest of these. There's some important lessons to learn here, and I'm going to give you the solutions to each one of them. But this video has gotten a little bit long, so I'll let you stop the video here and just go ahead and answer F through J, and I will give you the solutions to these problems. Thanks for your attention. Please, folks, as you're learning how to use this Casio calculator, feel free to see me with questions. I'm very happy to help you learn how to use it. It's a valuable tool. Most of the time we evaluate our expressions by hand, but it's good to know how to use it in a calculator as well. Thanks for your attention.